When Star Wars was relaunched in the toy aisles in 1995 as Power of the Force 2, a lot of us really didn't know how deep this was going to get. Was it a sort of a one-and-done wave with just the core characters? Well, no, it wasn't. It expanded to hundreds of characters and really helped relaunch Star Wars as a major toy brand after 10 years of being off the shelf. During the course of Power of the Force 2, we were treated to not only a variety of characters, but a variety of gimmicks too. Different pack-ins, different accessories, and while not every figure was a home run hit, there was definitely room for improvement as the line continued. It wound down in the wake of the Episode 1 launch, where the final waves of Power of the Force 2 were not only packed out with the same promotional item, the Comm Tech chip from Episode 1, but they were even tied in as flashback figures. And yeah, Episode 1 was a huge deal, especially before it came out, because of the anticipation. I did a whole video recently about how the Episode 1 and the Power of the Force 2 lines were merged into one, creating Power of the Jedi. It is on the playlist, but if you haven't seen it, I'll link it at the end of this video. So, looking specifically at the relaunch of Star Wars as Power of the Jedi, well, you have to look at the final figures that came out for Power of the Force 2. Now, most of them were focused around all of the A-list characters and how they related to the Episode 1 counterparts. Some, like R2-D2, were in both films. Others, like Luke, was compared to Anakin Skywalker. And the new movie was heavily promoted on the back of the card. So, yes, before Episode 1 came out, we were all so excited. This was the first time new Star Wars had been out, and it did over $1 million in sales the first night it hit retail, that Midnight Madness. But that soon cooled off, and toy makers realized what people were doing was they were souveniring the product, not actually playing with it. Meaning they were buying a token figure to say, hey, I saw this movie. Now, the original plan was for Episode 1 to continue as its own line, and it was going to be a Comm Tech 2 2.0 relaunch where all of the characters would come with new chips. This would include Power of the Force 2. The original idea being that Episode 1 would be strong enough to continue as its own brand, and then Power of the Force, containing the original trilogy figures, would continue as a separate branded item to have even more space at retail. And both sets of figures would come with this rounded oval-shaped Comm Tech 2.0, replacing the previous rectangle shape, which had twice the amount of footage or sounds. Well, after Episode 1 came out, the reaction and the fan base was a little different than the anticipation and the beliefs beforehand, and well, even though it made a lot of money when it was first released, the toy line quickly took a dive where, honestly, kids just were not getting into it, and adult collectors were souveniring versus buying the entire line. So the solution and the marching orders from Lucasfilm to Hasbro was to combine Power of the Force 2 and what would have been the extension of Episode 1 figures continuing on the red cards, but with the new Comm Tech chip. The new line, dubbed Power of the Jedi, was specifically requested by Lucasfilm to be 50% original trilogy and 50% Episode 1 or Episode 1 concept. And all of the first few waves were made up of figures originally intended for the separate Episode 1 and Power of the Force 2 lines. So characters like Annie with his a pit droid, or not pit droid, it's a pod race remote droid. I don't know what the heck that thing is, but whatever it was simply moved over and repackaged as Power of the Jedi. Same exact figure, but it dropped the Comm Tech chip in favor of a paper force file, which did let them bring the price back down to $5.99 from that steep at the time $6.99 price point, which for a lot of us was tough to swallow. Now, all of the figures for Power of the Jedi, especially at launch, again, were ones that were originally created to be Episode 1 branded or Power of the Force 2 branded. When they were combined together, you had a bit of a mix. Most of the A-list characters from the original trilogy, which would have continued the rollout from the last few waves of Power of the Force 2, simply wound up being in the Power of the Jedi as some of the first few waves. On the other hand, in order to accommodate Lucasfilm's request to have 50% original trilogy, there was a rush to put new characters in the line that were very low tooling, such as easy repaints like K-3PO here, whose new accessory and new paint job on an existing tool allowed for a quick-to-market solution. So Chewbacca, as the very first Power of the Jedi figure, was, again, originally intended to be the next figure in Power of the Force 2 with that Comm Tech. In fact, not only do carded samples exist, because he got that far along in the development process, But if you flip around and look at the cross-sell on the last few figures from Power of the Force 2, such as Admiral Mahdi and the Cantina Bartender, you will see that this chess-playing Chewbacca sitting at a table and feeling all good about himself appears on the cross-sell along with other figures that shipped under the Power of the Force 2 banner. Alright, so which Chewbacca is this? Well, as I said, it's when he's playing Dejarik, the hologram chess game you might remember from Episode 4, where C-3PO is warned to always let the Wookiee win because Wookiees are known to pull droids' arms out. Which, why didn't we see that in Episode 3? A Wookiee ripping a droid's arms out. That would have been such a cool payoff. Alright, enough of that. So yes, Dejarik is the hologram chess game that was made using almost paper-mache props. Later on, it would, of course, show up in the Disney movies with full CGI versions of the characters, but we still haven't gotten the home version, which kind of surprises me, because, Star Trek has their three-dimensional chess, and, we've got Star Wars chess out there. I'm a huge fan of chess. I've done a whole video about adapting chess into licensed brands. But, yeah, we have never gotten this. Now, Chewbacca as a character doesn't change that much between movies, not just the original trilogy, but even the prequels and the Disney films. He's pretty standard. So finding ways to change up even the original Kenner Chewbacca figure released in '78, well, that's a bit of a challenge. Unlike other characters that get Hoth outfits or Endor outfits, Chewbacca is basically Chewbacca. I mean, sure, we had the more muscular version that first shipped in Power of the Force 2, and Power of the Force 2, in order to keep Chewbacca out there on shelf, had to constantly come up with new creative solutions of how he could continue to ship, such as the Hoth Snow Speckled Deco. Hey, at least they sculpted the fur on him and didn't just, throw white paint on an existing Chewbacca tool. So, A for effort. So this Chewbacca would continue along that, but now get even more scene-specific with a Chewbacca that literally just recreates one single moment from the movie, when he sits back and feels like he won the chess game. That's it. Maybe 3 seconds of screen time, but hey, it was a memorable pose, and it's the first time we've ever gotten the chess set. So while we still wait to actually get one in real life, or even a action figure set of these characters, right now the only version is what came with Chewbacca. The second original trilogy figure to ship under the Power of the Jedi line was Jack Porkins, which, yes, no, that's not Luke Skywalker, that's not Biggs, that's not Wedge, it's yet another X-Wing pilot. So this is the now third X-Wing pilot we've ever gotten. Much like Chewbacca, Jack Porkins was originally developed to maintain the Power of the Force branding, but he didn't make it as far along as Chewbacca, as evident of the fact that here in this test sample, he's on a Chewbacca card, not his own. So who is Jack Porkins? Well, he's an X-Wing pilot, and one of the reasons that he stands out from some of the other X-Wing pilots is, well, as the print ad for this figure said, it was a X-Wing pilot, now in extra large. I'll have to do a video just on the amazing print ads Power of the Jedi did, because they were some of the best toy ads ever. So Porkins is one of those characters that doesn't make it through the Battle of Yavin, but he is overweight. Well, not overweight, but he's at least a little bit more weighty than characters like Biggs, who's recognizable by his mustache, or pretty much every other pilot. I mean, this is Gold Leader here, but outside of Biggs with the mustache and Porkins with a little bit of chunk to him, they all look basically the same. Same body, just different deco on the helmet. Porkins, between the goatee and, well, I guess the little bit of chubbiness, though not as much as you would actually think. The figure is way, way heavier than the actor was in real life. And that's pretty obvious when you compare it to a later Jack Porkins figure, which we'll get to in a moment. But hey, he came with everything you see here. Removable helmet, force vial made out of paper, and he continued that great tradition started by the Rebel Pilots 3-pack of removable helmets, making the original Rebel Pilot figures like Biggs and, well, Luke and Wedge in their snowspeeder outfits look a little bit dated. So as we made that transition to removable helmets, we were going to have to revisit some of these early releases. Now, again, Porkins is not as heavy as people seem to remember him. And no, we did not have a Porkins figure when we were kids, but he did stand out because his body type was at least a little bit different than your standard. And he's shown up in quite a few toy lines. I mean, he got his own little minifigure in the Micro Machines Star Wars Action Fleet, that would be fine. Action Fleet, that's the word. As well as a Lego figure, but, again, this one just used the exact standard Lego body. There was no way in Lego, without doing a custom unique tool, to make him a little bit heavier. Yeah, but he does come across that way in the busts and statues, and a lot of people even like to say that he's there in Rogue One, running alongside everyone. I mean, maybe that is him. I don't know, but he is an actor, someone who's showed up a lot in pop culture. So this is, of course, William Hootkins, and you may recognize him from Raiders or from Batman, the Tim Burton film. He's just one of those guys that seems to like show up all the time. And he showed up more than once in Star Wars Kenner Hasbro lines when the Yavin Pilot Pack came out towards the end of that attempted 3D era. This is a much better designed figure, and it's actually much closer to his actual body type. He's a little bit chunkier than a regular X-Wing pilot, and that does show, but he's not obese. He's not as heavy as the Power of the Jedi figure, so this Porkins figure did get replaced, but I think a lot of fans are still waiting for a vintage collection release so that they can have a definitive version. Hey, even take that, Battle of Yavin 4-pack and slap it on a vintage card back and bam, easy money, Hasbro. So yeah, Porkins lives, and now we finally had an action figure of a background X-Wing pilot for the very first time. And hey, a cool figure to initiate that deep cut into the Rebel Alliance.